Hello, welcome to the CADLink demo video. My name is Lisa Nissen and I'm the marketing specialist at QBuild software. QBuild is the industry leader in integrating engineering software with ERP systems, providing customer-centric solutions to over 2,000 discrete manufacturers worldwide. With partnerships across 50+ engineering and ERP systems and offices around the globe, we're proud to support our customers wherever they operate. QSuite, our comprehensive solution suite, includes CADLink, ECX Manager, Nestlink, and more. We empower our customers with streamlined processes and significant cost savings, ensuring efficiency and accuracy every step of the way. Now, to show you exactly how CADLink works in action, I'll hand things over to Dasha, our Senior Solutions Engineer. She'll walk you through how CADLink seamlessly connects your CAD and ERP systems to eliminate manual data entry and minimize costly errors.
So for today's demo, what I'll be looking or showing you today is an integration from SolidWorks. But do keep in mind, we do integrate with a variety of other CAD, PDM, and PLM systems. Would it be 3D, like SolidWorks in my particular case, but also the 2D systems as well, like AutoCAD Electrical, for example, or any other electrical systems. So I'm going to put on a hat of a design engineer who just finished this particular assembly and now ready to push the information into the ERP system. Instead of having to, once again, do any kind of export of the BOM from SolidWorks or starting to open up the ERP system and populate information manually one by one, what I would do instead is launch CADLink directly from the SolidWorks side. So CADLink acts as an add-on directly to your SolidWorks system and allows you to do that comparison of information first. So what CADLink is doing right now is it will first establish connection to the ERP system, which will be done very quick. And as soon as that comparison or that connection is completed, CADLink will start doing the comparison of the information between the two. Once the comparison completed as well, no changes to the ERP system are yet being made, but here is a whole list that shows you what is the same, what is different between what we have in our SolidWorks model versus the ERP side. Starting off, we're going to take a look at the left side of the screen where you're able to see the BOM structure of the information. In our particular example, as I'm using SolidWorks model that has a multi-level BOM structure, I'm able to see the same BOM structure here with parent-child relationship. Now, on top of that, I also see a couple of color highlighting, so that's what I'd like to address next. The color highlighting represent what is the result of the comparison between the two systems. Starting off with the color green, we're showing the components that are brand new to our ERP environment. When CADLink did a comparison, it found the part number from engineering and searched for that part number in the ERP system. And in this case, it was not located, meaning that information like part number, revision description, and quantity will be coming from engineering, specifically in my case from the SolidWorks custom or configuration properties, and populated for us here to review. At the end of the process, when we press save right over here, CADLink will create every single one of those green line items for you based on the information coming from engineering. Now, on top of that information that's coming from engineering, there's also going to be a couple of additional properties that you might not have in the SolidWorks properties, but it is something that would be required on the ERP side. I have a few examples to those properties here. So information like unit of measure, I would say, would be the biggest example, but any other ERP-specific properties like product group or item class is also something that CADLink can populate for you. In my particular case, I have a very simple logic set up in my CADLink settings that says that if a part is new, apply this information. That's why all of my green line item components already have this information populated. However, what if that default value doesn't apply? Well, not a problem. You do have an option to update it directly through the CADLink interface. You're able to click on a dropdown and choose a different value as you like. This dropdown and any other dropdown that you'll see in the CADLink interface will be populated with the value that are coming from the ERP system. So design engineer would only be able to choose what information would be accepted on the ERP side. So that is it for those green line items here. And just to note, once again, every single one of those green line items will be created for you in the ERP system upon saving by both grabbing information from engineering, like part number, revision description, and of course the quantity on a BOM, but also with additional ERP-specific properties applied by CADLink as well to help with that part creation ERP side. So just with this one color, it is a great example to show you how much time you will be saving for not having to do that work manually one by one. That is it for the green line items. So let's move on to our next color, which will be color white. White line items represent components that are existing in our ERP system and are fully synchronized between what we have in engineering versus ERP side. So if you see the whole line item in white, like we have here, all that means is the information is fully synchronized between the two and no changes are needed. Our goal with CADLink is to make sure that information is fully synchronized between the two systems. So our goal at the end of the process is to convert this whole bill of material grid into white line items. However, you will notice that some of my white line items have some yellow highlighting on them. And the yellow highlighting is how CADLink shows discrepancy of the information between the two sides. Would it be revision, description, or quantity? Every time CADLink notices a difference, it will highlight a difference field in yellow. Let's look into the description first. By right-clicking on the description highlighting here, CADLink will show me what the difference is. It will show me the value from SOLIDWORKS, and it will also show me the value from the ERP system. And right now, based on my CADLink settings, I said that if there is going to be a discrepancy of information when it comes to description, always utilize the value from the SOLIDWORKS side as the master. That's why that value appears first. However, of course, based on your requirements, you can adjust that to say that maybe ERP has the master of description. And as a CADLink user, if you see the yellow highlighting in description, it's not something you need to actively resolve and actively look at. It's just a way for CADLink to show you that right now the information is different. You can leave it as is. You can even go with the ERP description if you like, or what you can also do is to update the description here directly to be populated into the ERP side. So just like that, I have populated now a new description, which will now be updated into the ERP system under this existing part tracker. Now, what we haven't talked about at all during the demo today is the bidirectionality of CADLink. Not only will CADLink update this part record in the ERP system with this description, but it will also be able to update this description back into the CAD side as well. As we populated here, that is the description we're going to be populating back into the engineering side. In my particular SOLIDWORKS integration, it will be updated into customer configuration properties. With PDM integration, it will be updated onto the data card or the vault properties. Depending on integration, of course, different locations will be chosen for it. I do want to have another note here for our customers who do utilize PDM or PLM systems. And for those customers, most of the time, the update of the back to engineering is not required, which is not a problem. In the CADLink settings, you'll be able to disable that save if you prefer, and just make CADLink one directional by populating information from engineering into the ERP side only, and not back into the PDM or PLM side. So that is it with the yellow highlighting in description. And this once again will show you how we are able to not only show you the difference, but also allow you to do that cleanup if necessary. What I would like to address next is the quantity highlighting in yellow, as it is a little bit different. The yellow highlighting in quantity also shows you that there is a discrepancy of the information, but this is on a BOM level. And by right-clicking, I can also see what the difference is. In this example, I can show you that in my engineering model, this part is present once, but in ERP system, this part is present 0 times. All that means is just this part is not part of this BOM. So CADLink notices that, and upon saving, CADLink will add this existing ERP component onto this ERP BOM in a quantity of 1 specifically. Like I've showed you right over here, if there was a change in quantity from, say, let's say from 3 to 2, CADLink will also note that directly here and make that change accordingly. With this example, I'm showing you how we can add components to the ERP BOM. However, what if you need to remove components from the ERP BOM? Well, this is where this gray line item comes in play. If the engineer made a change to the design and you decided a component is just no longer needed in SOLIDWORKS, therefore we should also remove it from the ERP BOM. So CADLink noticed exactly this. This component is currently part of my ERP bill of material, but it's not part of my SOLIDWORKS model. Therefore, it will be marked as to be removed. Do keep in mind, CADLink will never delete this part tracker from the ERP system. That will always remain. All CADLink is going to do is it will update this subassembly by removing this part from it, and in my particular case, adding this one instead. So with those colors highlighting that I showed you today, you're able to see how we're able to create new components with green line items, how we're able to see the difference information with the yellow highlighting, and also how we can add or remove components with the yellow quantity or the gray line item highlighting. What I would like to address next is what we call a manual part functionality, which is going to be a line item in blue that I'll show you in just a second. A manual part is a component that you don't have in the engineering side, but something that you need to have in the ERP system. A couple of examples of those components could be hardware consumables, paint, glue, wires, packaging, stickers, user manuals, anything like that. So if it is your responsibility to add those components to the ERP BOM, you can do so directly through CADLink. Our first step is to choose a parent. Where do you want to add the component to? I'm going to say right over here. Right-click on a gray square and add a new line right over here. You will see manual part line is currently empty, but what I can do now is search my ERP system to find the component I would like to add. I'm going to search for a user manual, locate the Spanish manual I would like to add into the BOM, and just like that, the component is added. The only thing I need to adjust is how many of those manuals do I need, so I'm going to say 1 here. Now, I have added this component as a child component to a sub-assembly, but do keep in mind you can add a manual part on any levels as you like. And in addition to that, you can also add as many of those manual parts as needed. Where I see a lot of the time saved with this functionality is specifically for consumables or hardware components. Some of our customers would design and populate every single piece of hardware on the engineering design and made them into the correct assemblies and spend a lot of time populating every bolt, every piece of hardware one by one. With CADLink, you no longer have to do that. You'll be able to just go into the CADLink interface, find the levels where you like to add that hardware pieces to, and add them one time. Same applies with those components that might be added as virtual parts in the CAD system. So those components that are created without a geometry, which is additional time that the engineering team spends on creating one part at a time. Once again, with CADLink, you will be able to do so here by adding the component in and then sending this information into the ERP app. Additional example of those manual part components I'd like to address today would be a raw material. So if you do manufacture parts from raw material in-house, you might need to populate an additional level to the BOM to specify what is the component that you have modeled made out of. And that is an additional functionality you can do within the CADLink interface. To do so, you'll be able to select a component directly on our grid. I'm going to select this one just as an example. And what I can do now is similarly right-click on the component itself and add a manual part, but now as a child component. Now, just like we've done it with the manual part, I'll be able to search my ERP system, find the component I would like to add, press accept, and populate the information over. And once again, the only thing I'll need to adjust is how much of that sheet or length of pipe do I need. And once again, as simple as that, you've now added a child component to a BOM. Now, where we are able to save you some time on this raw material population is actually by reading that information from engineering. So if anywhere in engineering you have a property that will tell us what is the raw material you're using, which is the part number, and how much of it is being used, which is the quantity, CADLink can actually read it directly from there and populate it here in a CADLink interface for you. This will mean that you no longer have to do that one by one, as I've shown just now. However, this is also where the bidirectional functionality comes in play as well, as this is also something that CADLink is able to update back into engineering if needed. So let's say maybe one of the components that needed a raw material was not populated in the engineering side. Well, not a problem. You'll be able to populate it here, save this information into the ERP system to create the parent and child relationship, but also save that information back into your CAD properties to make sure that it's present there. So next time you use that component, both CAD and ERP system will already know the raw material that is needed. Okay, and that is it for our bill of material grid here. Once again, we talked about all of the color highlighting that CADLink shows you and all the functionalities that CADLink will be able to do for you in the ERP system when it comes to the part and BOM creation. What I'd like to navigate your attention to next is the side panel, which is an additional features or functionality where you're able to populate either operations or review some of the additional information with regards to this BOM. So starting off, let's look into the operation field here. I do want to note here that for some ERP system, Operation tab is optional. For some, of course, it is not. So do keep in mind that as I'm going through this portion of the demo. What I can do now first is choose a parent of what I need to populate the operation sequence to. Would it be a top level? Would it be a sub-assembly? Would it be a part with raw material? Does not matter, it will work identically. For the purpose of the demonstration, what I'm going to do is use this sub-assembly here. And what I can do now is to add the sequence operation that is needed to create this sub-assembly out of the 6 children. And to do so, I'm able to add operation step 1 by 1 as needed. Step 10, step 20, I assign the work center and assign any of the additional required operations information here. Or alternatively, what you're able to do is use operation template that allows you to make this table much quicker. So I'm going to delete that here and walk you through how that is done under the operation template here. So these are preset operation templates coming from the ERP side, but what I can do is I can choose the one I would like to apply, load that in, and you will see the table is pre-populated for me. So that's just a huge time saver for not having to do the table one by one every time. If you're having the sequence operation that you're using more often than others, you set it up once and you apply it to assemblies as needed. But of course, whatever information needs to be updated, you still do have an option to do so without affecting the template by both assigning additional operation steps just like that, or changing up information themselves as needed. Now, once you have the sequence of operations assigned, what you'll need to do next is assign a related operation, and that will be done directly in the BOM grid here. So far what we have said is to create this 1.4 subassembly, the children need to go through operations step 10 to 70. However, what we need to say now is that which step of the operation sequence each part is entered in. Everything you leave at 0 will automatically apply to operation step 10, but of course if some parts are entered in the different operation steps, you would be able to choose them here. Let's choose a couple, just like that. Now, as it stands right now, what that means is that every single component that has operation step 10 assigned will go into operation step 10. Upon completion, they will join the other two at step 20. And then everyone will go to step 30, 40, etc., etc. Okay, and that is it for operations and routing. What I'd like to switch on to next is a couple of read-only tabs that you're able to see in the CADLink interface. First, we have a Changes tab. The Changes tab will populate all of the changes that will be made to the ERP system upon saving. Once again, no changes have yet been made to the ERP system. ERP doesn't yet know about any of the changes that we're about to make, but here's a whole list of what is going to happen. This is the list that will show you which parts will be created, which parts will be updated, which parts will be deleted from the BOM, all in a simple to use table. Now, if you have a very strict ECN or ECO process, what CADLink is able to do for you here is export this table directly to Excel or PDF to create additional documentation. Now, let's move on to our next tab, which is going to be a CAD Data Tab here. And on this tab, the engineer is able to see all of the CAD property information as required. So once again, because I'm running CADLink on SOLIDWORKS today, what I'm able to see is customer configuration property for a selected component. Of course, as you're using different CAD systems, you will see different information populated. Just to give you an example, with an inventor integration, you'll be able to see inventor I property information. With PDM, you will see the data card. With Vault, you'll see the Vault properties, etc., etc. So all, of course, will depend on the actual CAD system you're using. But this is a great place for engineers to come back to see what is that CAD property information if something needs to be reviewed. You wouldn't have to go close CADLink, go back to your CAD system, find the part, find the property, open it up, and go through multiple screens. You'll be able to see all of that information directly in the CADLink interface itself. Now, with that, we have one last tab to go to today, and this is the Messages tab. And this is by far the most important tab for CADLink. This is the tab that will show you all of the errors or warnings that are preventing you from saving information into the ERP side. So as we talked about before, CADLink is not a blind push tool. We don't just take information from engineering and just throw it into the ERP system and just hope it all works. We do perform a validation to make sure that it will be accepted. And this is exactly where the result of the validation is going to be shown. Would it be an error coming from engineering? Would it be an error done by the CADLink users throughout the CADLink process? Both would be caught by CADLink and populated for us here. As you see, I do have one error message populated, and on top of that, the Save button right over here is going to be grayed out and disabled. So right now, because of this issue, I'm not able to send information and send wrong data into the ERP side. What I can do now is double click on an error line itself, and CADLink will lead me to the line that has that issue. Now, as a CADLink user, I have two ways I can move forward. My first way is to ignore an error. My second way is to resolve an error. So let's ignore it just as an example to start. What if this error came from engineering? And what if I'm not the one responsible for correcting it and I don't know how to fix it? Therefore, I just need to skip the line item from being saved for now. And that is done under the Save column right over here, which allows me to uncheck the line items from being saved. Well, this does mean that we are going to be saving a partial BOM into the ERP system, which is of course not ideal, but this will make sure that you are saving even a partial BOM and not keeping the whole BOM hostage because of one of the issues here. You'll notice that as soon as I unchecked the subassembly from being saved, the message tab has been cleared out and the save button is now enabled. Where this functionality of the same column can also be used is kind of an opposite way. What if you have some components that have a very long lead time and they just need to be in the ERP system immediately while I still work on the rest of my assembly? Well, not a problem. You are able to choose of what you would like to save on a part-to-part level. So for those of you who are maybe using a staggered population into the ERP system, as you work, you populate them over, not a problem. You have that option to do so through CADLink as well. Now, we talked about how we can ignore an error, but now let's bring that error back up and actually resolve it. So most, if not all, errors would be able to resolve directly through the CADLink interface here. And in my case, the error was actually generated by me during the demo. Therefore, it is an error that I'm able to resolve here. Double-clicking on the error itself once again, CADLink will lead me to the error line, and in my case, an operation code is missing. So when I was setting up operations, I set up the operations tab, but I did not set up a work center, which is of course required. Therefore, all I have to do is to populate the work center, and as soon as I've done so, you'll notice that the messages tab is now empty, and the save button is once again enabled. With that is it for a quick CADLink demonstration. So what we looked into so far is how we can firstly grab information from engineering, compare it to the ERP system, populate the result of the comparison in the bill of material grid here with the color highlighting, showing us what is the same, what is different, what will be changing in the ERP system. We have also seen how we can adjust the part information as needed, maybe adjust some of the ERP specific properties, adjust descriptions as needed, etc., etc. We also looked into how we're able to adjust the BOM information by both deleting components that are not required on the ERP side, but on ERP BOM, but also how we're able to add additional components like manual parts or raw materials. On top of that, we've also looked into assigning operations and routing. And lastly, in the messages tab, we looked into how we're able to validate this BOM against the rules of the ERP system and make sure that everything will be accepted. The very last tab of the CADLink process is this save button here. As soon as the save button is pressed, what CADLink is going to do is it will first update or create the part record information. So every single green line item will be created one by one by one. And on top of that, any of the existing components, the ones in white, if they had any part changes, like our description, you'll be able to update it there as well. Once all of the part records have been saved into the ERP system, CADLink will now start doing the BOM save as well. Would it be on a top level, on a sub-assembly, or on a part with a raw material level, CADLink will create and update all of those BOMs one by one as needed. Once those BOMs are being updated, this is also where the raw material and manual parts are added to the conversation, as well as the operations and routing. Once all of that save into the ERP system is completed, at the very, very end of the process, CADLink will also ask you if you would like to update information back to engineering. Do we want to update this description back into SOLIDWORKS properties as an example? And if the user chooses yes, then that is what CADLink is going to do as a very, very last step. And with that, I think we can walk through those benefits once again. So what I've shown you today is how CADLink is able to firstly reduce and eliminate that manual data entry by creating the parts and BOMs directly in the ERP system without having the user manually populate them one by one by one. Because we're going to be grabbing information from one spot and sending it to the next, we'll also be improving the data accuracy. No chances of accidentally mistyping the information and therefore creating a brand new part number that is not necessary, or populating a wrong quantity on the BOM and therefore generating additional errors in inventory or BOM records. Because of that, this whole process will be just much faster, and therefore we're going to be streamlining the engineering data into the ERP side with just a few clicks. And with that, of course, that will lead to the lack of production delays and lack of rework. Therefore, more jobs will be able to be done by the company altogether.
Thank you, Dasha, and thank you to everyone for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like to learn more and see how CADLink can work for your company, you can schedule a complimentary in-depth demo using the link in the video description or directly through our website. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more CAD and ERP integration content. You can also follow us on LinkedIn to stay up to date with our latest product news and customer success stories. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.